Hello again, YouTube. This is Jay with Tap and Turn Gaming, and I'm coming at you with another cycle review. This cycle will be the 5 Praetors from the new Phyrexia set. As you can see, they're laid out here in front of you. I have 4 of the physical cards, and then 1 I do not actually own, so I am representing it on my iPod for this video review. So if you've seen any of our cycle reviews before, you'll know what this video contains of. If you haven't, basically what this video will consist of is me taking these 5 cards and ranking them from the best to the least best. Because all 5 of these cards are really good. None of them are actually bad. So I don't want to use the word worst, because none of these are bad cards. They're all really good. But yeah, I'll be ranking them from the top, my personal top pick, down to the least best out of the 5. So without further ado, let's take a look at the first one we have here, which is Jin-Gitaxis Core Auger. He's the blue Praetor. He's a 10 cost 5/4. He is the highest costed out of the 5. He has Flash, which is pretty cool, but what he does is at the beginning of your end step, you draw 7 cards, and then each opponent's maximum hand size is reduced by 7. You know, like I said, all these cards are really good. He's no exception. My only real gripe about this guy is that he costs 10, so it takes him a bit to get out onto the board, unless you're cheating him out somehow. I actually do play this guy in a Reanimator deck that I play. I have not done a deck tech on this deck yet, so I don't want to spoil anything about it, because I do plan on doing a deck tech on it in the future. But, I mean, yeah, he draws you 7 cards on your end step, which is really, really good if you're empty-handed. Or even if, you know, you're not empty-handed. But I mean, in order for him to really, really shine, you probably want to have something on the board that, you know, like a reliquary tower or something like that, that makes it so you have no maximum hand size, so you can really, really abuse this guy and just keep all the cards that you're drawing. You know, so he's kind of, you know, he is good on his own. But he's really, really good if you either are empty-handed at the end of your turn, or if you have something that makes it so that you have no maximum hand size. Or if you're playing him in a Reanimator deck, because in that kind of deck you probably want to be dumping cards in the graveyard anyways. So yeah, that's Jin-Gitaxis Core Auger. Next we have Elesh Norn, Grand Cenobite. She's a 7 cost 4/7 with Vigilance. That statically gives all your other creatures +2/+2, and creatures your opponents control get -2/-2. She's amazing. And I'd like to point out the art on this card. I love the art on this card. I think it's one of the best artworks I've seen on a Magic card in a while. So props to the artist, Auger. I don't know if I said that correctly. I apologize if I didn't, but that guy did some phenomenal artwork on this card. Just some of the best art I've seen on a Magic card. But anyways, I think Elesh Norn is probably one of the strongest Praetors out of the 5. Just being able to statically pump all your creatures +2/+2, and then give all your opponent's creatures a -2/-2 is just really, really good. If your opponents are playing something, you know, playing creatures that have 2 or less toughness, you know, they're just gonna die immediately. Or if they have ones in their hand that they wanted to cast, it's essentially senseless for them to do so, because they'll immediately get killed unless they have some sort of like enters the battlefield type ability. But yeah, Elesh Norn, she's pretty straightforward, but she's really, really good. Next up, we have Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger, or as in my playgroup we call him the Klex. He's a 8 cost 7/6 with Trample. He's the green Praetor. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land produced. And then whenever an opponent taps a land for mana, that land doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. This guy's phenomenal. He ramps your mana by essentially doubling it. You know, if you tap a forest for a green, you get 2 green. If you tap, you know, a Ravnica shock land for either color, it will produce another of either color. If you tap a Ravnica bounce land, you know, like a Golgari Rot Farm maybe, you're going to get black-green and then another black or a green. So those lands will produce you 3 mana. So this guy, for what he does, he's so good. And then his second ability is just mean. Whenever an opponent taps a land for mana, it doesn't untap during their next untap step. So you can essentially lock out an opponent if they try to play something big, or if they empty their hand and they tap out. Those lands aren't going to untap on their next turn, and then they basically can't play anything on their next turn. I've had this guy in quite a few green decks that I've had in the past, and I've actually cut him out of these decks. The reason why I've done that is because this guy draws so much hatred when he hits the board. If I play him, he would just immediately get killed by somebody. If someone else played him, you know, that person would just get ganged up on and targeted until this guy was off the board. He just draws so much hatred that, you know, in decks that I've had him in, I've cut him out for other things that, you know, can benefit me and draw less hatred. I mean, as good as this guy is, don't get me wrong, he's one of the best out of the 5, but just the sheer amount of times that he just immediately gets killed and hated off of the board just made it so that I cut him out of decks for something else. But yeah, that's Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger. Next up we have the Black Praetor, Sheoldred, Whispering One. She's a 7-cost, 6/6 with Swamp Walk, which is pretty cool on its own. But where she shines is that at the beginning of your upkeep, you return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And then at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. So she's a free res from your graveyard on your upkeep, and everybody else's upkeep, they have to choose and sacrifice a creature. You know, in Commander, you're always probably going to have creatures in your graveyard. You know, in creatures with value, no one's going to play like a vanilla, like 3/3 guy in their EDH deck. So, I mean, this card is really good because you're always generally going to have creatures in your graveyard, and this will get you one back every turn. And also, it will make it so that your opponents have to sacrifice a creature on their upkeep. So, if they're lagging behind, if you're controlling the game, and they, you know, you have this on the board, and they can only play 1 creature a turn, that creature is essentially just going to die on their next turn because it has to be sacrificed. So yeah, I think Sheoldred is a card that everybody should play if you're playing black. She's just so good. So yeah, that's Sheoldred, Whispering One. And lastly, we have the Red Praetor. I actually don't own this guy, but here he is, represented on my iPod. He is Urabrask the Hidden. He's the Red Praetor. He's a 5-cost 4/4. That's basically a fervor on a body. Creatures you control have haste. That's cool. You know, and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Personally, I think this guy is the weakest Praetor out of the 5. All the other ones are just amazing for what they do. This guy, when he was standard legal, he was amazing. This card was a very expensive card when it was legal and standard. But, I mean, from an EDH standpoint, he's just not that good. I mean, he is the cheapest costed out of the 5. You know, and giving all your creatures haste is cool and everything. But, you know, if you want to do that, just play a Fervor, or play a Hammer of Perforos, or, you know, Fires of Yavimaya, or something like that. you know, the fact that he makes it so that your opponent's creatures come into play tapped, yeah, that's okay, but it's not hugely relevant, I feel, in EDH. Compared to the other 4, he just doesn't stack up to them. So I think he's personally the weakest Praetor out of the 5 from an EDH standpoint. And that is Urabrask the Hidden. Okay, so as far as ranking these from number 1, my number 1 pick, down to number 5. For my number 1, I think I would have to go with Elesh Norn, the White Praetor. Yeah, I may be a little bit biased again, you know, for this card just because I love the artwork so much, but I really think that this is, you know, the number 1 Praetor out of the 5. You know, just being able to statically make your opponent's creatures weaker, and potentially make it so that creatures that they do cast just immediately die is just really, really good in my opinion. And also, she pumps all your creatures +2/+2. So, I mean, she doesn't have to go in any type of specific style of deck. I mean, there are decks that she would really, really shine in, like maybe like Token Overrun if you played this in like a token deck. She's going to pump all your tokens and make all your opponent's creatures weaker. You know, she's got Vigilance too, so, you know, you could send into the red zone with her and then be able to block with her on an opponent's turn. So I would have to say Elesh Norn is my number 1, personally, just because she can annihilate your opponent's creatures if they're low toughness. And, you know, she makes it so that they hit for less as well if they survive the static ability. So I would have to put Elesh Norn in the number 1 spot. For number 2, I'd have to go with the Klex, or Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger. What he does is absolutely phenomenal. He ramps your mana and he locks your opponents out on their next turn if they tapped lands. Those lands won't untap during their next turn. So, I mean, from an EDH standpoint, this guy is amazing. The only reason that I put him at number 2, I mean, it's a tough choice between him and Elesh Norn for me anyway, for the number 1 spot. But I feel like he would go at number 2 just because of the sheer amount of hatred that he draws from everybody when you drop him. Yeah, don't get me wrong, Elesh Norn will draw hate towards you as well, but I feel like this guy would draw way more hatred because no one wants to not be able to play stuff on their turn. That's what the game's all about, is casting spells, casting creatures, and showing your opponents, you know, what you have up your sleeve when you cast it. This guy makes it so that you can't do that if you played something on your previous turn. So from an EDH standpoint, this guy is amazing, and he personally, he will go as my number 2 out of the 5. Number 3, I would have to go with Sheoldred, the Black Praetor. You know, a 6/6 swamp walking body is really nice. You know, if your opponent's playing black, you can basically get in for 6 damage every turn. But just the fact that you get a free res on your turn, and then your opponents have to sacrifice a creature on their turn, especially if you're controlling the game and you have them down to 1 creature a turn, they're just going to lose it every turn because they have to sacrifice it on their upkeep. You know, unless they have some sort of, like, shenanigans where they can cast things with flash and, you know, cheat something into play on their upkeep, they're just going to have to lose their only creature that they have on the board. So, you know, and getting creatures back from your graveyard straight into play in EDH is awesome, because more than likely you're going to have creatures in your graveyard. It's EDH. The board's going to get wiped a lot. You know, everybody plays sweepers, so you're always going to have some value in your graveyard as well, and this card lets you get some of it back every turn. So Sheoldred is my number 3 pick. Number 4... he's going to stay right where he is, Jin-Gitaxis. You know, he's the blue Praetor. I mean, don't get me wrong, this guy's really, really good. Card draw in EDH is amazing, because, you know, you only have 1 copy of any given card in your deck. And when you're drawing cards, that makes it so that you're, you know, getting closer to drawing those cards that you want or the cards that you need. The only reason that I think I would rank him lower than the other three currently, he's really high costed. He costs 10. You know, that's a lot of mana to pay for a creature. It's probably going to tap you out. I mean, drawing 7 cards at your end step is really great, only if you are either empty-handed or close to being empty-handed, or if you have like a reliquary tower down or something. I mean, that's just my personal take on it. I mean, I feel like he would really, really shine in a deck that is like a Reanimator style deck, or like I said, if you have something down that abuses your hand size and makes it so that you don't have to discard down to 7 cards at the end of your turn. You know, if you have 7 cards in your hand and then you draw 7 more, you know, and you don't have something that increases your maximum hand size, you're just going to have to dump some cards in your graveyard. So, I mean, in a Reanimator style deck, that doesn't really bother you too much. If you're not playing that specific kind of deck and you don't have a Reliquary Tower down, and you don't, you know, if you have your hand pretty well stocked when this ability triggers, you're going to have to dump some cards in the graveyard. Yeah, I mean, making it so that your opponent's maximum hand size is basically 0 is awesome. Just, I think, me personally, for him to really, really shine, you'd want to play him in a specific style deck. The other 3, you really don't have to do with that. You know, Elesh, Norn, Vorinclex, Sheoldred, you don't have to play in any specific style of deck, but I think for Jin-Gitaxis to really shine, you would want to play him in a specific style deck to really abuse him. So, he would go as my number 4 slot. And then, obviously, my number 5 would be Urabrask the Hidden. He's just the weakest one out of the 5, I think. You know, all he really does is, you know, he's a fervor on a body and makes it so your opponent's creatures come in and play tapped. Big deal. You know, if those creatures have some sort of ability, like an activated ability that doesn't require tapping, they can still use them. You know, I just don't think he's hugely relevant in Commander. I just don't think he is. In Standard, when this card was Standard legal, this guy was awesome. He was heavily played. He was a very pricey card. But in Commander, he's just not that good. He's really not. I mean, if you want to give your creatures haste, play a Fervor, or play, you know, any of the other cards that I mentioned before. You know, Fires of Yavimaya, Hammer of Perforos. Play one of those if you want to desperately give your creatures haste. But just the tapping, the making so your opponent's creatures come in to play tap just isn't that good in Commander, I feel. So Urabrask, I'm sorry, buddy, but you go to the number 5 spot in my personal opinion. So that concludes my ranking of the 5 Praetors from New Phyrexia. Just another real quick rundown of the top 5. At number 1, I put Elesh Norn, Grand Cenobite. At number 2, I put Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger. At number 3, I put Sheoldred, Whispering One. At number 4, some of you may disagree with this ranking. I know a lot of people love this guy, but me personally, my number 4 is Jin-Gitaxis, Core Auger. And then number 5 is Urabrask the Hidden. I just feel like he's the weakest out of the 5. So yeah, that is my cycle review of the 5 Praetors. Please, if you want to leave a comment in the comment section below this video, please do so. We love to hear your comments and your suggestions here at Tap and Turn Gaming. You know, if you would rank these cards differently, you know, feel free to comment on that. You know, if you feel like I hit the nail right on the head with how I rank them, leave a comment about that as well. If you disagree, whatever it may be, this is just my personal take on these 5 cards. If you feel differently about it, that's fine. It's your opinion. So yeah, thanks for watching this video, guys. Stay tuned to our channel for more videos. We're trying to pump out a lot of new videos just to get awareness for our channel up there. So you may see, you know, some videos being shot out to our channel pretty frequently. But, you know, we just love making videos about Magic the Gathering. So, yeah, so thanks again for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, and stay tuned to our channel for more videos. Thanks a lot.